everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Dominican University of California's Leadership Lecture Series in partnership with Book Passage. My name is Denise Lucy, and I'm a professor of business and the director of our Leadership Institute that is so thrilled to welcome you tonight. And we have, what a remarkable leader we have in the hall this evening, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. And should we welcome him, please? Just really thank him for coming. Our lecture series is in partnership with Book Passage, and because of that, we were able to bring these remarkable leaders from around the world to our campus. And without their help, we could never make it work. Elaine Petrocelli this evening will be interviewing Lieutenant Governor Newsom, and that's an extra special evening for us because Elaine and Bill have been incredibly important for our community. I'd like to thank Elaine and Bill Petrocelli for their support as well. So what we seek to do is we seek to highlight opportunities across the disciplines where leadership emerges. And when we see Gavin Newsom's life, especially someone who lived in San Francisco for those years when he was our mayor, I'm thrilled to have him in this room. He's changed my life for the better, and I'm so happy that he's here at Dominican's campus. We call him Dr. Newsom at Dominican because we honored him with an honorary doctorate here a couple of years ago, and he was an amazing speaker, and we are so lucky to have him back. So for those of you who are not aware, these lectures are offered not only live, but we do videotape many of them, and we post those on our website, as well as Channel 30 on Wednesday nights airs them. We also have a podcast at http://dominican.edu, and you can hear them when you're sitting there at your computer desk. So that's a great opportunity, and we hope you'll tell your friends. We can't provide this program without sponsorship and without support from our campus community. We have students, staff, and faculty who volunteer their evenings, and I would like to ask you to thank them for giving their afternoon and evening today to welcome you. Thank you. Our lead sponsor for this series is Private Ocean Wealth Management. And Private Ocean is called Personal Powerful Wealth Management. They're named 7 times by Worth Magazine as one of the top 100 registered investment advisors nationwide. And it is one of the largest and oldest privately held wealth management firms in Marin. This is their second full season to support us, and it is a thrill to have their support. And please thank Private Ocean for their help. We have 2 more sponsors tonight for this great event. Our gold sponsor is Umpqua Bank, which was welcomed Circle Bank into your family, and we have them here this evening. Umpqua Bank is now in Marin offering personal, small business, and commercial banking services, and thanks to Umpqua for its community giving, its community action programs. And they have a really special project I heard about. It's called Connect program, offering its employees the opportunity to take work hours, 40 hours a year, to give back and volunteer in the community. Thank you, Umpqua Bank. And of course, our dear Bank of Marin, one of our most wonderful supporters and sponsors, strives to build a long-term valued relationship with their customers based on trust and respect. And committed to their customers, their businesses, and the community, they have actively supported this program and many others in Marin, and I'd like to have us thank Bank of Marin. The CEO of Bank of Marin, Russ Colombo, is here this evening, and he will be introducing our guests. Russ? Please welcome Russ.
Good evening. Welcome to the Leadership Lecture Series. This evening, Book Passage CEO Elaine Petrocelli will talk with Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom about his new book, Citizenville, in which he outlines how ordinary Americans can reshape their government for the better. Gavin Newsom was elected as the 49th Lieutenant Governor of the state of California in November 2010. His top priorities are economic development and job creation, improving access to higher education, and maintaining California's environmental leadership. Mr. Newsom came from a successful background in both the private sector and local government, having served as both mayor of the city and county of San Francisco, and before that, a county supervisor. In 1996, Mr. Newsom was appointed by San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown to the city's Parking and Traffic Commission. Soon he was elected president of the commission, and in 1997, Mayor Brown appointed him to the city's Board of Supervisors. Voters elected Mr. Newsom to the board in 1998 and re-elected him again in 2000 and 2002. In 2003, Mr. Newsom was elected the youngest mayor in San Francisco in more than a century. After only 36 days as mayor, Newsom gained worldwide attention when he granted marriage licenses to same-sex couples. Under his leadership, San Francisco became a center for biotech and clean tech. In 2007, Lieutenant Governor Newsom was re-elected with more than 73% of the vote. He built upon the success of his first term, launching new environmental initiatives and comprehensive strategy to transform one of the city's most troubled neighborhoods into a life sciences, digital media, and clean tech center. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom.
Everybody. Thank you, Russ. Thank you. All right, here. Thanks for being here. Elaine, we've already interviewed in the back, so we're done.
We're up through.
We've got it all figured out.
Well, I asked Lieutenant Governor Newsom what I should call him, and he told me Director of Parking and Traffic.
That brought me back, Russ. No one would ever remind anyone of their most important role in life, Chair of Parking and Traffic Commission. I remember just briefly, this is way off, but Willie Brown, when he first became mayor, did what Willie Brown tends to do. And that's do whatever the heck he wants without consulting anyone else. So his secretary calls me up and says, would you like, I'm 24, 25 years old, would you like to be on the film commission? I'm like, I've hit the jackpot. Absolutely, film. This is perfect, 24-year-old. And I show up to City Hall, and there's a dozen plus people, and he starts swearing people in. He says, you know, Bob, my oldest friend, going on the planning commission, an outstanding urban planner. And then, you know, Josephine, you know, she's a world-class botanist. She'll be on the Recreation and Parks Commission. This is a great privilege. Her service will mean great deal. And Gavin Newsom, whose father I think I met once, and I know what I'm saying, is now the chair, and here I'm, the film commission, the chair of the Parking and Traffic Commission. And I'm like, what the heck just happened? His staff wasn't told, and it's a true story. First of all, I didn't know what chair meant. And there was only one newscaster there from Channel 4 back in the good old days of Channel 4. It's still holding on to their credit. And the person said, what's your vision for parking and traffic? Oh, man, I made some joke. I pay my parking tickets. There you go. Anyway, it's a miracle I'm here is the long-winded point.
Well, we're glad you're here, and we're so glad you wrote Citizen Bill. And I love the subtitle, How to Take the Town Square Digital and Reinvent Government. One of the things I loved about the book that I'd love for you to tell us about a bit, I had never thought about government as the old 20th century and before way as a vending machine, where you might get something out, but you could kick it a lot, but not much would happen. And I like the way you talked about that. And could you talk about how that's changing?
Well, it's not yet. I mean, so my argument in the book, it begins with this frame that government as we know it today, David Kettle, a political scientist, years and years ago made a reference to this, and I had a chance to pick up his book and was inspired by the example. He described government as a vending machine, a traditional vending machine, where you put in $1, taxes, and you get out police, fire, healthcare, education, national defense. And if you don't like what you get, you do what many of us have done. You shake the machine. You kick it. You protest, the Occupy movement, for example, or maybe the Tea Party on the other side of the aisle. And it's a framework of scarcity, of finite choices. And that's how government, for a lot of us, operates. You vote, guys like me in elected office decide. We decide what's in that vending machine. And my argument in the book is that model, that old industrial, top-down, hierarchical model, is no longer relevant to the world we're living in. We're living in a world, particularly with our kids and grandkids, a world where this generation, this net generation, those under 30, this generation we call of choice, these digital natives, are living in a world of customized services, of real interaction. And yet we're still framing our engagement with government locally, statewide, and federally with this old top-down vending machine model. And my argument in the book is to make government operate more like a platform. And we can talk about what I mean by that as we get deeper into the conversation.
Well, when you became mayor of San Francisco, you actually turned a lot of things upside down that had been always done another way. And I remember your open data Fridays where you evaluated how the week went.
Yeah.
And I loved that, but I don't see that anymore. Yeah. Well, I love that you made mistakes and you...
Yeah, I made them with the best. Seems you're quite familiar with a few of them. Well, you know, Elaine, you know, one of the things that I'm very proud of, my Uncle Paul's here, and his son, Jeremy, my cousin, is running my businesses with my sister. We've kind of made it a family business. I started a small little wine store right out of college, Plump Jack, and that's actually how I met Willie Brown. If you want to be appointed to something, do a fundraiser for the right candidate for mayor. That's the real story behind my appointment. That's not right. I'm not suggesting it is. I get it. But anyway, I had this small little wine store, and you know, one of the things I did early on is I established a failure award in my businesses. We have about 15 businesses now, getting close to 1,000 employees. And I don't say that to impress you, but to press upon you that the business has grown. And one of the core values of the business proposition is to encourage my employees to take action, to take responsibility, to step up and step in. And we have a small hotel up in Squaw Valley. And during the summer, we have a big mosquito problem. And this hotel was built in 1959 for the delegates of the 1960 Winter Olympics. It's still holding together. And we've patched this old hotel together, Plump Jack Squaw Valley Inn. And it has no air conditioning. So in the summer, you keep the doors and the hallways open. And there's a reason I'm saying all this. I had one of those eccentric, they all tend to be, and I say this lovingly, night clerks. You know, those folks when you get in at 2 in the morning, you think, who works at a hotel at 2 or 3 a.m. shift? Well, this young man did and quite enjoyed it. And he decided, frustrated as he was by the complaints he received late in the evening about the mosquitoes and the heat, he decided to take upon himself to go out and buy some catfish without any permission. Went out and purchased a bunch of catfish. The purpose was we have a bunch of pools, small little lakes all around the hotel that he would dump the catfish in to appropriately go after the larvae of the mosquitoes. Quite an ingenious idea. He left, as he would, his typical shift, 10 to 5 in the morning, and I got this call early in the morning, panic call. I'm in San Francisco, and Ludo, who's been with us, my engineer forever, calls and says, I've never called you before. I said, Ludo, what the heck? The place burned down? He goes, no, this is the strangest thing, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I don't know what has happened, but I'm embarrassed to even try to describe this to you. All throughout the hotel are body parts of fish. The fish tails, eyes. It's inexplicable. Obviously, it's a prank, but I just want to let you know, but I'm going to figure this out. Calls back 20 minutes later, says, you'll never believe this. Apparently, Joe bought some catfish. Why? I have no idea. Put them in the pools outside, and the raccoons got them. The hallway doors were open. The raccoons were thrilled. They were delusional. They were running around with this spectacular meal, eating these things, throwing the carcasses everywhere. And I thought, what a fabulous screw-up. And it inspired the Failure Award. And so every month in our business, we give a bonus to the employee who screws up the most. And so I'm all about, and I got into politics, and, we're risk adverse. Understandably so. We're scared to death of tomorrow's headlines. But you think of the most successful private sector companies, They understand that, as Winston Churchill did, that the secret of all success is moving from failure to failure with enthusiasm. You've got to learn from your mistakes. You've got to be willing to make mistakes. You've got to iterate. And that entrepreneurial spirit does not exist in these top-down, bureaucratic institutions with the machine thinking, the vending machine thinking that dominates. And so I've tried to engender, for better, sometimes worse, in my engagement of local government and my efforts now at the state level to try to engender some of that entrepreneurial thinking into the life of our governing institutions.
You talked in the book about a town I never thought I wanted to go to.
Yes.
But now I think I'd like to go there. Manor, Texas, a little nothing burg outside of Austin.
5,000 people, Manor, Texas. A wonderful example. Let me connect a dot. My book is about three things. It's about leadership, appropriate since that's the sponsorship that brings us here. It's about citizenship, and it's about technology and how the three shall meet. The argument for me, and the reason I title this Citizenville, is that we've forgotten about our individual and collective responsibilities as citizens. We've allowed ourselves to be treated more like subjects. We've allowed ourselves to accept this premise that government does things to us, but government doesn't do things with us. And I think that's a big mistake. And I've been on both sides of this, the receiving and delivering end. It is that model of you vote and I decide. And you get back in the game 2-4 years later when I ask you again to update my contract. And I think it's a terrible mistake. We use the tools of technology remarkably effectively to get you to vote, don't we? You just think about your emails you were receiving in the Obama campaign from Bill and Hillary and all our friends by first name, dozens and dozens. Very good at using the technology to engage you to show up at a neighborhood town hall, perhaps to show up to volunteer, to write a check. Remember to vote on election day. We amplify your voice. We want to engage in a two-way conversation. But once the election's over, we turn those voices off and we go back to this broadcast model. This book is about addressing this fundamental fact that winning an election is not governing. Politics is not just about getting elected. It's about that hard work that begins after you take that oath for office. And how do we use these tools of technology to amplify your voices, to allow you to be more active and participatory in the life of your city and our state and our nation? Not be inert citizens, but truly participatory citizens, co-producers in the life of our communities. So I went out across the country looking at best practices. And I thought I would find myself in big cities, maybe larger states, but I found myself in Manor, Texas, town of 5,000 people, as Elaine says, a suburb right outside of Austin. And this wonderful young man named Dustin had decided that there was something more important than the currency inside your wallet, and that was civic currency. And he wanted to engage the community and amplify voices, democratize voices, get more people to show up than show up at a traditional town hall. And we've all been there at the town halls, right? Where the loudest voices dominate, where folks with stickers come in and they take over, and you feel if you could find the time to get there, they're never conveniently located or the times never work. It's hard to necessarily engage. And so he recognized that, and he thought, you know what, this new tools of technology, how can I create a platform for engagement? And he created something called Manor Labs, Manor, Texas. And it was a lab of sorts, an experiment of civic engagement. And he decided that one of the ways that he can engage people more is to create a reputational system of engagement. And he actually handed out something called InnoBucks. And the more you volunteered in your community, the more you contributed to the life of your neighbors, the more dollars you would earn, these virtual dollars, these InnoBucks. It got so much attention and people were so enthusiastic, and the reputational quality actually engaged more and more people, that the local newspaper started to pick this up and encourage more participation. The business community was so excited and enlivened by this, more people volunteering, mentoring, involved in civic activity, that they decided to translate those InnoBucks for discounts at their businesses. And it created this remarkable feedback loop, a connection with government, neighbors to neighbors, with this platform of engagement using these tools of technology that people were already navigating, regardless of time of life. And it got me thinking about how else can we create a framework of similar type of engagement. And we went around the rest of the country. I spent almost a year and a half virtually casing other people's joints, physically doing the same, to look at ways that we can use technology to more substantively engage citizens in a two-way conversation, not the one-way conversation that we so often have.
I think that the people, even those of us who were not born with an iPad in our cribs, really want that tech engagement. But I feel that government in general is trying to say, no, we have our methods, don't mess with us.
Well, it's interesting. You remember the My Barack Obama campaign of 2008. It was mesmerizing. Even if you weren't supportive of the president, it was an extraordinary campaign. 35,000 self-organizing communities came together. And the president, understanding this principle and advocating for fundamental change, we're not going to change the players, we want to change the game, he said in Washington, D.C., did a noble thing. He said, you know what, this campaign is not over. There's 2 seasons. I recognize that, campaigning and governing, but I want you to be participatory in this new season of governing. And he created something called Change.gov. You may vaguely remember this by the following 30-second story. This was at a time when he was arguing the issues of the war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, the war on terror, issues of climate change, and the financial meltdown. And he did a site called Change.gov saying, I want to hear from you. Let's keep this going, this two-way conversation we've had in this bottom-up organic campaign. And he did what Michelle Obama did just a few weeks ago at the Oscars. He pulled out the envelope on this town hall meeting where he had people physically there and online, said, let's hear from all of you, 35,000 organized communities. What's on your mind? What should be my priority and priorities over the next 100 days? Unveiled the envelope, and what was the number one thing Americans across the aisle wanted the president to do? Iraq? Was it Afghanistan? Deal with the financial meltdown? No, climate change, our number one thing. Mr. President, our number one issue is legalize marijuana. Well, the president responded as you did, and the online community didn't take nicely to that. They were sincere and serious. They said, Mr. President, you wanted real two-way conversation. Here's what we think is important. Well, what happened? Well, go on your smartphone right now and Google Change.gov. It went down for reconstruction. This whole model of engagement was converted to the White House website. Thank you very much. Your voices really matter greatly. Check out our website in the one-way conversation. And he went back to a broadcast model for the next 4 years until that election, and we started having that engagement that we all enjoyed with those email exchanges through Election Day. It's difficult, right? It's tough. So you've got to commit. Now, the president, to his credit, has decided a new strategy, and you're all familiar with it, even if you've forgotten. It's called We the People. Jay Carney, poor Jay Carney. He has to respond now to every petition north of 5,000 signatures. So here's Jay Carney a few months ago when Piers Morgan decides to unveil his true self, enjoying him much more now, taking on the NRA post-Newtown. And the NRA folks were none too pleased with this Brit. And they decided to go on the We the People website and force the hand of the White House to respond, because it only took 5,000 signatures, to deport Piers Morgan back to the country that forced us to bear arms in the first place. 70+ thousand signatures, and here's Carney in the middle of a conversation on drones, the memo's just coming out, and here he is, has to face the press. Well, you said you would respond, Jay. The White House will respond, will you support deporting Piers Morgan? And Carney made some comment, flippant comment, and what did they do the next day? Well, they just raised the threshold from 5,000 to a minimum now of whatever, 25,000 on the We the People site. This is tough stuff. And by the way, if you go on the We the People site, There's 100,000+ of you, maybe one or two of you here, that want to build a Death Star. Some of you are so upset about the daylight savings happening this Sunday, you want to get rid of it. You've done about 200,000 signatures on that. And so now the White House not even paying attention, the We the People website. But my argument in this book is they missed the point. Well-intended. But those are petition sites. And I'm not arguing for you to petition government just to do things for you or more of the same. I'm arguing for a more enlightened approach where we create a mechanism, a platform for your more active participation. Not more of me doing things for you, more of you doing things with all of us together. A new division of labor. That's the framework of this notion of government as a platform. Think of Steve Jobs, who created this construct when he took the old phone, which operated like a vending machine, limited choices. It's whatever someone else decided, and you had no choice but to buy it and maybe 2 or 3 competitors with the same limited choices. Until he said, you know what, I don't believe in a model of scarcity, I believe in one of abundance. And he created a platform, the iPhone. He didn't design 800,000 apps. He did a dozen or so just so he can give you a sense of what it's about. But what he did is created a platform where Apple now has engaged millions of private sector people and developed 800,000+ products in these apps and unveiled things that none of us and none of the folks at Apple could have ever imagined. Think about that in the context of government. How can we engage all of you in designing things that people like me can never understand because we can't see the world from your set of eyes? One thing I know the hard way is none of us is an expert. Not any one of us is an expert in everything, but all of us are an expert in something. How do I tap your unique skills and your expertise? How do we create a framework of networked intelligence and bring that in to the life of our community? That's what this book ultimately is about, amplifying your voices, connecting you where you already are, building a sense of community again and active participation and citizenship.
In the book, you talk about the buttons and the people who got involved in participatory budgeting. I couldn't believe that anyone would ask me, a citizen, how should we spend your tax money?
Well, we do that, but it's a bit of a fraud, isn't it? I mean, we do it after the budget's already baked. Sorry, yeah. Cat's out of the bag. We have a budget town hall where 98%, 99%, dare I say 99.5%, I kid you not. Look, I ran a city with and a county with $6.8 billion budget. You remember those raging debates in the San Francisco Chronicle? We're around probably $30 to $40 million. That was the entire debate. Not around the corpus of the $6.795 billion. So when I say 99.5, I think I may be understating. And we have 2 or 3 town halls, and we said, boy, we really had a great, robust conversation. We had this wonderful, people said, more police, less fire, more of that. And then special interests came in, and good special interests, saying, our homeless program is more important than their homeless program. That's not participation. That's an act of just indulgence to make you feel that we care and you matter. And it's not because we're bad people, it's just that's the way things have been done. We don't know any better way. And in this book, I'm offering examples where there are better ways. Went to Brazil. Place Porto Alegre. I take a quarter of their budget and they offer it to the public in a participatory way for the public, citizens, to decide where the money goes. They started this and people thought this was the dumbest idea in the world. Mob rule. Folks are not experts. They're going to go crazy, waste this money. Well, it's become a national phenomenon. It literally, I kid you not, I mean, during the World Cup, the trend the last World Cup a few years ago, the trend on Twitter was for participatory budgeting, not the World Cup. People are that engaged. New York City just tried this. They took a modest $6 million, a little experiment. They never had more people engaged, this was last year, in a budget ever, more African Americans and more Latinos. More voices, more choices. A budget where people felt really engaged. a two-way conversation. These are examples of ways of truly opening up government, which is a fundamental principle of this book. Open, transparent government versus the default of closed government. Open up data in your city hall, in your state capitol, the Recreation and Parks Department, the Building Department, the Department of Environment, etc. And then see what public can do, what quality of imagination you could bring to the dialogue.
In the book, you talked about thinking of government as concierge. Now, I know what a concierge is at a hotel, and at Book Passage, we have a concierge who will, pick all your presents for you and wrap them and all that. But what's a concierge in government?
Well, I mean, our purpose is to make your life better and more meaningful, to connect dots, to be a key convener, a cultivator, a coordinator, a platform of active engagement and participation, to be big on what and small on how, as my friend Eric Liu described it to me. To solve the issues of ignorance and poverty and disease, but be a little less prescriptive on how we actually deliver it. And I'm a progressive Democrat that, by the way, listens to the president with all the aspirations of universal preschool and higher minimum wage, and am appreciative, but think about the fact, well, in San Francisco, been there, done that. $10.55 minimum wage, $9, that was 5 years ago. Universal preschool, that was done in 2010. Universal health care, we're not waiting around Obamacare, been there, done that. So I'm a progressive Democrat, but I do accept this notion that we tend to be a little top-down and a little prescriptive. The standard operating procedure, the way things have always been done. Take it or leave it, this monopoly. Think of mass education, fast food education. The idea, respectfully, that we're lining people up in rows of desks the same way we lined people up in rows of desks a century and a half ago is, to me, tragic. The idea that we have a bell that rings every 50 minutes, the same bell that may have rung during Ben Franklin's day. The idea that we put people in those desks based upon their date of manufacture and have single subject matters, and we have people lecturing and broadcasting is remarkable to me. In a world where that's no longer relevant. That's the standardized machine thinking that I think is dramatically being challenged. Now you say, all right, all this is cute and fancy. This guy's overstating things. I would challenge you to consider the following. I would make the case, Don Tapscott, who's a friend, made this as well, and I could not agree with him more. He makes the case the industrial economy is running out of gas. It's served us remarkably well the last 150, 200 years. But I agree with him. Think about what's happened to the media industry. Peter, you know this well. I remember not many years ago, people were thinking, bloggers, please. Newspapers will be around for the rest of our lives. Now, all of you go in hindsight, well, of course not. That's obvious. But it wasn't so obvious that many years ago. Think of what's happening to publishing.
Don't get me started.
I'm just learning this, Elaine. You've understood it better than anyone. And you're succeeding despite the challenges of it. Think of what's happened to the music industry, jobs again. They talked about these radicals, Sean Parker, Napster, and a great fight with our good Marin County resident from Metallica who was fighting back. And these radicals. And all of a sudden, Jobs made a deal with the music industry. And all of a sudden, we're not buying albums anymore. We have customized choices. We're downloading songs. I have my old uncles, the good old days, they tell me. It's like black and white movies. We'd smoke cigars. We'd have martinis at 3 o'clock. The old stockbrokers. Maybe you were one or two of them. You had no choice but to come through the old stockbroker. Till Schwab came along and E-Trade, all of a sudden the financial industry services started to change. You're seeing the contours of these changes now in government. I would argue we're on a collision course with the future in government. We are on the cutting edge, as I say in the book, of 1973 in technology. 3 letters, D, M, V. 1970 technology. I kid you not. That's the backbone of your DMV system. The director of DMV acknowledged the other day as we dropped a $208 million contract to upgrade the system after spending more than half of the money without even being a quarter of the way to produce a result. They literally just dumped the contract. Front page of the LA Times last week. You probably didn't know about that. Acknowledged the system's 40 years old and could collapse like this any day. Oh, sure, they have a fancy website that allows some online, but the plumbing, it's what lies underneath. Did you hear? How many of you have heard about the scandal at the Recreation and Parks Department at the state level? Yeah, probably almost all of you. How many of you are aware of what happened with the case management system at the courts? One of you. A judge, perhaps. In 2004, we initiated an upgrade on your behalf of the 58 county court system records. Long overdue, well conceived. $260 million was identified. It was going to be done in 2008 for $260 million. 2008 went by. 2009, folks decided to check back in. They did an audit. We had already spent over $500 million. 2 years behind. In the audit, it noted that one subcontractor had a $33 million contract, had 103 change orders. I kid you not, this is a fact. And it spent over $100 million and wasn't even done with their work. The report concluded that if we wanted to complete the project, we've already spent $500 million. Instead of $260 million done by 2008, we could complete the project, I'm not making this up, look it up, for $1.9 billion. We might get it done in 2015. Now, one of you heard about that. Hundreds of millions of dollars of your money was burnt up. All of you heard about the Recreation and Parks scandal. And what's that scandal? All that money was saved and kept. How could we not spend your money? And sure, I'm as upset as you. We were shutting down 70 parks and we were asking the private sector money and they were sitting on this money. How is it possible you all know about that, but you don't know about the court system? Or the $208 million at DMV 2 weeks ago? Or the $371 million payroll system where we just fired the contractor 2 weeks ago, and now there's finally one little blog in the Sacramento Bee saying the system may never get updated. Or CalPERS, the My CalPERS update, 49 data consolidations, everyone pleading for the old system, not the new consolidated system, which is only $226 million over budget. We are not good at technology. You knew that. My book makes a case. It's time for us to, as Abraham Lincoln said, disenthrall ourselves with this notion that we can still build out large IT systems when there's now apps for that. We're going through multi-year procurements for $500,000 websites when your nieces and nephews, those teenagers, are building them over the weekend for free. Citizenville is the antidote to some of these problems.
And when you talk about procurement and the whole system of procurement, you've convinced me, has to go. But what I was fascinated with is that you suggest gaming as
strange.
An antidote to this.
Well, I don't want to do that. I felt compelled. The data led me to this. I mean, you do know this. It's not just those crazy kids and grandkids of ours that are down in the basement playing online games. You know intimately what I'm talking about, don't you? You know, if you're 8 to 18, we'll start there because it's convenient. You're spending 53 hours a week on online games. I mean, heck, I love this. Eric Schmidt of Google said this. It was so great. He says that we have two states, asleep and online. 40% of us, there's a new survey just came out, 40% of us before we physically get out of bed are online. I'm one of the 40%. So are you. Just get the phone, check what's on, decide if I want to wake up. 500 million people on this planet spending more than an hour a day playing online games. 42-year-old women are the typical Facebook online gamer. not that kid downstairs. If you're under the age of 21, the new surveys say you spend more time playing online games than you have, not surprisingly, in the classroom between 6th and 12th grade. I mean, you can't make this up. Farmville, my friend Mark Pincus, the Rift, Citizenville on Farmville. I remember this kid, this billionaire now, who came to me saying, you should really check out my company at one of these open door days when I was mayor. I'm like, what's the name? Farmville? That's cute. Thanks so much. Pincus, Mark, nice to meet you. Yeah, have my second. We'll call you. Until I read in the paper a few weeks later that this was the only guy in 2007, we're in the middle of this macroeconomic turnaround, that had job openings in San Francisco. And so I invited him to my State of the City. And he actually happily joined. And he was up on stage. And he starts describing this thing where he says, yeah, people go online, they're spending hours and hours a day cultivating virtual gardens. And they buy tools. I said, that's great. Buy tools, what, just sort of a fun thing? He said, no, they use their credit cards. And they spend lots of money. You can't make that up. And it's a phenomenon. Forget the stock right now. It's a bloody phenomenon. Zynga. And so my whole point of this is meet people where they are. You have games for good now. Social games. Nick Kristof just came out with one, Half the Sky. You remember Schoolhouse Rock? We all do, right? We were entertained and educated. How does a bill become a law? Wow. The only thing they didn't tell us about was lobbyists. But we all remember it. And so here's an opportunity to meet people where they already are. Games are not the exclusive solution, nor is participatory budget, nor is reputational InnoBucks, nor are the app stores that I'm arguing for city services. Like you download an app, an iPhone or Android, you can start downloading apps in cities for city services. But they're all tools in the toolkit. And it's about meeting people where they are, educating, entertaining, and finding ways to engage people as you educate people.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to stop with my questions here and ask the first question that came up. And it is about Proposition 8, something that we're all very interested in what the court is going to do.
Yeah,
but
so am I.
I have several questions here from people who want to know about that initiative. How is the initiative process managed to take over California?
Well, I talk about this thank you, because I'm going to connect a dot. You know, some people have argued in this book that is this lieutenant governor arguing for direct democracy because, my gosh, look how well it's worked for California. Fair point. And that someone clearly hasn't read the book, because I make the case in the book that's not what we're arguing for. Because direct democracy with the initiative process has been run amok in California. It's been taken over by the persuasion industry, special interests, on all sides of the political aisle. And we saw that, I say respectfully, good people can disagree. My father did with me for years, with Prop 8. What's remarkable to me is here we are just 9 years later, and we're at the Supreme Court. Wow. In just a few weeks, oral arguments. In a few months, there'll be an adjudication about the fate of millions of people as it relates to not just California, but potentially, because of the amicus brief, the president's side, the 7 other states that do gay marriage in all but name with civil unions, and the potential that it actually will impact them, not just California. We'll see. What's remarkable to me is the date of my birth. I'll give it up, 1967. Blacks couldn't marry whites in 16 states in America. And for those young folks, a few of you that are here, this is important for you to remember. This is not 1937, 47. This is not just in the black and white days. This is the one that long ago. In this case, Richard Loving broke the law by saying I do to Mildred Jeter. They had to leave the state of Virginia. They went up to Washington, D.C., but they made a terrible mistake by coming back into the state of Virginia. When they did, they had a bunch of police that cased their house. And late in the evening, they broke into the house and arrested them because they broke the law. The judge, I'm a son of a judge, so I can talk like judges talk. The judge, in the case when sentencing Richard Loving to 1 year in prison, as he should be, for marrying someone outside of his race, said, "Sir, God, sir, God put different races on different continents for a reason. God never wanted the races to mix. Look it up. I paraphrase, almost verbatim nonetheless. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison or, interestingly, 25 years out of the state of Virginia. Take your pick. But he fought. He was an active participant, not an inert citizen. He stepped up and he stepped in, and he went to the Supreme Court in 1967. The activist judges, this is before Bush termed the term, in a unanimous decision, overturned those laws in those 16 states. And you know what's remarkable about it? 70% of Americans disagreed with that decision. In 1967, two polls, 71% and 70% of Americans opposed interracial marriage. My long-winded point is, some have argued that it's too much, too soon, too fast that we go in front of the Supreme Court on gay marriage. 70% of people opposed interracial marriage. It took between 1949 to 1967 for it to make its way out of the courts in California to the U.S. Supreme Court. And here we are just 9 years later, and already 54+% of Americans, including 200+ Republicans, some current Republicans in elected office, others that have signed briefs, and hundreds of companies have now signed briefs. It's the right time to do the right thing. It's the right time for this court to step in and step up, and I am hoping and praying the court that matters most is the opinion of Justice Kennedy, who will establish this precedent and principle and do the right thing and overturn Proposition 8.
What a courageous thing
I
you
hope
did.
So.
I have a student, Kelsey, who wants to know what advice you have to give someone interested in entering politics, and specifically how it might relate to education policy.
I'll get to that by giving this advice. My father gave this to me, and it was codified when I read, of all people, Tom Peters, business writer, who distilled my father's thinking. And it goes to my point about leadership in this book. And that's the question posed. My father admired these folks, and that's why he spoke often about them. What did Martin Luther King, this is the educational question, King, Mandela, Gandhi, and Václav Havel have in common at the peak of their influence? I'll repeat. King, Mandela, Gandhi, and Havel at the peak of their influence. What did they share in common? Now, I would answer that as I try with my father and with all this, they tried, here they tried it, and missed the point. His answer, the right answer, jail time. Now you say, wait a second. I would say, what are you advocating for, Dad? He said, well, they shared one other thing in common. They exercised their moral authority. They didn't wait to be something or somebody to do something. You can argue that Havel, in fact, Havel argued a lot about this himself. After he became president of Czechoslovakia, he lost a lot of his influence. And Mandela the same. When they gained formal authority, they had to deal with the realities within that institution of governance. And so my advice to your young student is to exercise your moral authority. Don't wait to be something, an elected official, to do something. You have remarkable capacity as an active participant, as a citizen, to do extraordinary things that even Mandela, Gandhi, Havel, and King couldn't have imagined, because you have the ability now with these tools of technology to organize and to amplify your voices, as the Facebook youth of Tahrir Square did, as the Indignados of Spain are doing, as the Weibos, the microbloggers in China are doing, in a government that spends more money suppressing the voices of their citizens than they do on national defense. They still can't stop the 250 million microbloggers in China for exercising their voice. There's something remarkable happening in the world we're living in. And these tools of technology, I argued very ineffectively on Colbert. I loved Meet the Press. It was relaxing. Colbert are making large institutions small. And my point is, small is getting big, big is getting small. I have a chapter called Armies of Davids. And the slingshot here is technology. You think about that. You think about that in terms of the Arab Spring. Large, inflexible, hierarchical institutions, private, corporate institutions, governing institutions, are very vulnerable in this world. And it's a world that I describe in the book on a conversation I had with Tom Friedman, who, when I asked what world, and for those of you at reception, I noted this, what world, Tom, are we living in at a conference down in Santa Clara a year ago? And he said, I'll answer that by giving you this following statement. He said, when I did my book, The World is Flat, it was on the New York Times bestseller list in 2005. And if you haven't read the book, buy his book after you buy mine, because I just want 1/100th of the sales of his. But his World is Flat, where he talked about this connected world. He talked about the merger of globalization and technology. He says, can you believe in 2005, he says to me, he says, Facebook wasn't even in the book. In 2005. He says, Twitter was a sound, the cloud was in the sky. 4G was a parking space, LinkedIn a prison. Apps were things you filled out to get in Dominican, and Skype, for most of us, was a typo. What a wonderful way of describing the world we're living in, he said. Those things, they're ubiquitous in our lives. The cloud, Skype, LinkedIn, 4G, apps. Ubiquitous in our lives, they didn't exist as we know them 7 or 8 years ago. His point, we're not living in a connected world anymore, but we're living in a hyper-connected world. The rate of change is unimaginable just a few years ago. What does that mean to large governing institutions? This is my wake-up call to government, large and small, Democrats and Republicans, all across this country. That's why I've engaged in a challenge to mayors across the country. And we're going to get hundreds of mayors on board. We're already getting mayors from cities all around the country. A Citizenville challenge representing these principles of openness and transparency, of open data, and a new two-way engagement and conversation with government, because I believe in government. I'm not arguing against it, quite the contrary. I'm trying to make a case for it. And I don't want to see it get rolled over. And I don't want to see you get rolled over by politics as usual. I'm sick and tired of the sand in the gears of our democracy that we're all experiencing every single day in slow motion, real time. And I'm less and less inclined to care about who's to blame at this stage, because it doesn't change my life or my kids' life. I want to focus on what to do. And we've got to do better. And I was inspired at the end of that State of the Union speech by those last 4 lines of the president, because he connected to citizenship ever so briefly. I want to hear more from him on this. Because that's not about being a Democrat or Republican. That's the one thing that should bind all of us together. And we've lost that. Heck, we've lost it in California. North, south, east, west, coastal, inland. Democrats, Republicans, tribes of like mind. But remember when we were the tentpole of the American economy in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, no state grew jobs like California. We were in the future business, that pioneering spirit, the coast of dreams. There was a sense of spirit and pride about being Californians, a state of dreamers, of doers, of entrepreneurs, of innovators on the leading and cutting edge. And now we're Democrats with Democratic plans, Republicans with Republican plans. We're coastal folks, we're inland folks, we're farmers, we're ag, it's all divided. We've got to get back to that notion, as Dr. King said, that web of mutuality, or as the Bible, I can say it here. The Jesuits taught me, we're many parts but one body. And when one part suffers, we all suffer. We're all in this together. Citizens.
That is beautiful.
I don't know. That's sweet of you. Thank you. I'm passionate about this. Sorry, I'm Irish. I can't help myself but keep speaking. I apologize.
Thank you for this amazing book. And I told you quietly, but as someone who has a little tiny city of 72 people at my store, I've learned so much about leadership and transparency and how people are relating to one another. And So I'm really honored that
thank you, Elaine.
you came to Dominican tonight.
Oh,
and
my honor. Thank you.
we'll sign books. And
I'll sign whatever you'd like, and I'll be here as long as you'd like. Thank you all so much. Elaine, thank you.
Thank you.
Grateful. Thank you all very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to be with you. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Don't take your mic off yet.
All right.
I didn't get to ask him the most important question on my pile there. Will the Giants win the World Series again?
I mean, 2 out of 3. Let's make it 3 out of 4. Count on it. Yeah.